Alright, so last night at UFC 216, history was made and we had a new interim lightweight champion crowned. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my reaction to the co-main event and the main event of last night's card. But before I get into it, let's see how I did on this card. If I count the Fabricio Verdum fight, I went 6-3. If I exclude that fight, I went 5-3. Lando Vannata and Bobby Green ended up being a draw. The same thing went for Beneil Dariush and Evan Dunham. So I don't know whether to count those as wins or losses. I'm just not going to count them at all. And the reason why I'm hesitating to count Fabricio Verdum's win is because he didn't fight Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis ended up pulling out a few hours before the fight due to back injury. I guess a previous back injury flared up on him. But I'm not going to count that one, or maybe I should, I'm not sure. But if I do count the Verdum fight, then I went 6-3 in picks in terms of wins and losses. If I don't count the Verdum fight, I went 5-3. So I didn't do the best on this card. There was some shockers to me. I really did think that Tom Duquesnoy was going to beat Cody Stamann. I knew it was going to be a close fight. Both guys were 15-1. It was a tough competitive fight. But they ended up giving Cody Stamann the split decision victory. Now, Mara Borella actually surprised me. She beat Kalindra Faria. I did think that Kalindra Faria's experience was going to be, a difference maker in this fight. The fact that she had stepped in there with some big names, but Romero really went out there and she really performed. She did finish the fight via submission. Now, the other fight I got wrong was John Moraga. I just thought that Baby Latov was the younger, stronger, hungrier fighter. John Moraga's a vet. Baby Latov did possess a lot of power in his hands. The majority of his wins came by knockout. I did think he was an Atlanta shot and put John Moraga away. It didn't end up going that way. Instead, it was John Moraga who landed a clean shot to the chin of Baby Latov and put him away in the first round via knockout. So now let me give you my personal post-fight bonuses or awards or whatever you want to call them. But I do give submission of the night to Demetrius Johnson. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the video. My performance of the night goes to Demetrius Johnson as well. Knockout of the night goes to John Moraga. And I think that fight of the night obviously goes to Lando Vannata and Bobby Green out. Now let me just talk about that fight really quick. Lando Vannata is a guy that I had extremely high expectations for, especially due to the fact that his UFC debut was actually against Tony Ferguson. He took that fight on 2 weeks notice. He came in, he wobbled Tony Ferguson a couple times in the first round, and his movement was just excellent. His footwork, his head movement, his counter-punching abilities, it really surprised me for him to step into a fight of that magnitude against Tony Ferguson and perform the way he did. Now, Tony Ferguson eventually weathered the storm. Lando Vannata gassed out, and I didn't blame that on him because he took the fight on 2 weeks notice. You can't expect somebody's conditioning to be as good after only 2 weeks of training as opposed to having a full training camp. So I didn't blame him for gassing out, but that's what happened. Tony Ferguson took advantage of it, jabbed him up, busted him up, and eventually sunk in a Darce choke in the second round. But I was really surprised at how good Lando Vannata looked in that fight. Now, after that, he followed it up with a clean knockout of John Makdessi, I believe it was. Now, that's not saying much because Makdessi's been knocked out a few times in his career. He was a veteran. He doesn't really have much left in the tank, but it was an impressive knockout that Lando Vannata put out. Now, after that, he stepped inside the octagon with a young prospect in David Tamer. It was a competitive fight, but Tamer did get the better of him, neutralized his counter-punching with speed. So after that, his UFC record was at 1-2. Now, the David Tamer loss, I accepted it because David Tamer is another young prospect, a potential maybe future contender in the division. But I mean, this fight with Bobby Green, man, if Lando Vannata is the real deal, like a lot of people said he was, like his training partner Donald Cowboy Cerrone said he was, then this fight against Bobby Green, you have to put him away, and he was very close to doing that in the first round. He wasn't able to finish him. He wobbled him with an excellent counter punch, put him on the mat, tried to ground and pound him. Bobby Green came back, and it was a good fight. I mean, Bobby Green won one round, but I think what hurt Lando Vannata is that this would have been a win, but after he wobbled Bobby Green, as Bobby Green was trying to get up in the first round, Lando Vannata threw an illegal knee, and they ended up deducting a point because it was a hard knee. Now, Joe Rogan was a little bit upset that they deducted a point because it really didn't land flush to his face. But if it would have done some serious damage. But they did end up deducting a point. But that is a fight that Lando Vannata has to finish. Bobby Green, I believe, had lost 4 in a row or something like that. But that was a fight that Lando Vannata really needed to go out there and perform and put on a performance and reassure the people that he will be the real deal in terms of title contention. But I mean, it was just another close fight, another slugfest. So I want to see where Lando Venata goes from here. If he ends up living to the expectations that we have for him, if he really lives up to his full potential. But that's just something that I wanted to talk about because I really did have high expectations for this guy. But enough about Lando Venata. Let's talk about the champion, and arguably the most dominant champion in UFC history, and I think he did establish that last night with a great performance against Ray Bourque. Demetrious Johnson went out there, took care of business. Ray Bourque did his best to try to make the fight scrappy, and he did try to initiate scrambles in the first round. Early on, he did take Demetrious Johnson down early in the fight, but Demetrious Johnson was able to get back up, and that's what he does. He's just so skilled. There are no holes in his game, and I knew that eventually Demetrious Johnson was going to dictate the pace of the fight. He was going to control the fight, and he was going to make Ray Bourque make a mistake and then capitalize with a submission. So I did choose Demetrious Johnson to win the fight via submission. I think in the 5th round is what I said. He did finish the fight in the 3rd round via armbar, and it was just an absolute beautiful submission. He had Ray Bourque's back standing up. It looked like Ray Bourque tried to throw an elbow from that position, and as soon as he did that, Demetrious Johnson lifted him up, slammed him, and in mid-air grabbed the hold of his arm and sunk in the armbar. It was really deep. You could tell Ray Bourque was in a lot of pain just looking at his facial expressions, but nevertheless, it was a great performance on Demetrious Johnson. Now, Ray Bourque he's really young. I believe he's 24. He's going to use this as a learning experience, and I do think that he will come back stronger. Maybe he should take a fight against somebody like a Joseph Benavidez to kind of still prove himself, because he still needed to prove himself. Fights over Yusir Formiga and Luis Smolka didn't really do much in terms of showing everyone that he is a legitimate contender. I think that you need to fight somebody like a Joseph Benavidez. Maybe you fight the winner or loser. I think you should fight the loser of the Sergio Pettis and Henry Cejudo fight. I think those fights make sense for Ray Bourque in order for him to stay in title contention. But he's young. He's going to use it as a learning experience. But Demetrious Johnson, man, 11 in a row. That's something special. And he did it in an amazing fashion. And I expect him to continue to dominate in that division. Now, whether he stays to fight the winner of Henry Cejudo and Sergio Pettis, or if he wants to fight Joseph Benavidez again, I'm not sure what Demetrious wants to do. He's pretty much dominated every contender in that division, but maybe it's time for a super fight. Maybe it's time for him to move up, challenge the winner of TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt. Maybe I heard talks about Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw willing to move down. I'm not sure how tough of a weight cut that'll be for both those guys, but I think that'll be something that will be very interesting if he decided to fight the winner of those two guys. I'm not sure how he would fare against Cody Garbrandt or TJ Dillashaw. Now, I understand that he was in a close fight with Dominic Cruz, and that was in Dominic Cruz's prime, but the difference between Dominic Cruz and a guy like Cody Garbrandt, if he's able to beat TJ Dillashaw, is that Dominic Cruz is very skilled. He's an all-around fighter. He's very good at pretty much everything, but the only thing that Dominic Cruz lacks is power. Therefore, there is no real risk when it comes to fighting Dominic Cruz. The only risk you're taking when you fight a guy like Cruz is being outstruck, outpointed, just missing a lot. So that's the only risk that comes with fighting Dominic Cruz. Now, with Cody Garbrandt, he's an excellent boxer, and he really did neutralize Cruz's unorthodox style and his unorthodox movements with superior boxing, with patience, and he has tremendous power in his hands. Cody Garbrandt does. So if Demetrious Johnson steps in there with a guy like Cody, I'm not sure how he would do or how he would fare. I'm sure he's very smart. He's a master of the craft of the game, of the sport of mixed martial arts. So I'm sure he would come up with a game plan to really give Cody Garbrandt trouble. But if Garbrandt lands a shot, is he going to be able to eat that punch from a bigger, stronger guy? Because Demetrious Johnson walks around at about 130, 135, 140 pounds. Cody Garbrandt walks around at about 160, 165, I'd assume. So he's a much bigger guy, possesses much more power than a Dominic Cruz has. Now, if he fights TJ Dillashaw, that'll be a good fight, because Dillashaw is also not known for finishing his fights. He's just he's a great striker, a great wrestler. He's very smart, very technical with his strikes. So I think he would fare much better against TJ Dillashaw, much more of a chance to beat him. than he would Cody Garbrandt, because Cody Garbrandt is really impressing me lately with the maturity that he showed inside the octagon against Dominic Cruz. And that was actually pretty his real first test, because he was number 5 when he fought Dominic Cruz. He had only beaten guys like Thomas Almeida and Takeya Mizugaki, so he didn't really have these big wins. And many people thought that Dominic Cruz would just be too experienced for him, but he was poised in that fight, very patient, as I said earlier, and he really did perform, and he took the belt from the champion. Even if Dominic Cruz was banged up, which I believe he was, I did think that he was dealing with some lingering ankle issues, foot issues, maybe even knee issues, but Cody Garbrandt nevertheless still went out there. He still performed. So it'd be interesting to see where Demetrious Johnson goes from here, if he wants that super fight, if he wants that, because the only way he's going to make the amount of cash that he wants to make, the only way he's going to get paid is if he moves up and if he takes part in a super fight, because there's no one in that division as of right now that Demetrious Johnson is in his prime that's going to be able to put up a great fight, a great performance, or any big names in that division that casual fans would know. But I do think those are the fights that should happen, is the winner of Henry Cejudo and Sergio Pettis, or if not, then a super fight between the winner of TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt. So now let's talk about the real winner of last night, the real lightweight champion, as I like to call him. Even though there's an interim in front of the lightweight champion, it doesn't matter. I think he's the real champion as of right now. As long as Conor McGregor is out, as long as he's doing other things, as long as he's talking about fighting other guys that aren't even, legitimate contenders in that division, or legitimate threats in that division, Tony El Cucuy Ferguson is the lightweight champion. He proved it last night. I mean, this guy has ran through everybody. He's currently on a 10-fight win streak. He's beaten former champion Rafael Dos Anjos. He's beaten Edson Barbosa, who's a legitimate contender in the lightweight division. He just beat Kevin Lee in an excellent performance. Now, in the fight last night, Kevin Lee did have some success early on. I mean, he was able to get Tony Ferguson to the ground. Tony Ferguson tried to escape, tried to twist his body, tried to flip Kevin Lee over, but Kevin Lee showed that he's stronger, that he's very strong. Was able to get on top, was in the mount position on the mat, and was actually landing some pretty hard shots to Tony Ferguson. Now, at the end of the round, he threw a couple of punches after the bell, and that's when I knew that Kevin Lee was fighting off of emotion. And in this big of a fight, on this big of a stage for the interim lightweight title, there's too much at stake. You can't bring emotion into this. It doesn't matter what Tony Ferguson was saying outside of the fight. It doesn't matter what Kevin Lee was saying outside of the fight, all the trash talk that was being done. You have to leave that outside the cage. You can't take that in with you. You can't fight off of emotion. Once you step inside that octagon, you have to focus. And I think Kevin Lee was focusing on the wrong things. He was focusing on not just beating Tony Ferguson, but pounding him, hurting him. I think that's what he was trying to do. Instead of just sticking to his game plan and being smart, he was trying to force things into action. Now, that's what separates a young guy, a young prospect like Kevin Lee, from a veteran, from a championship contender like Tony Ferguson, is the poise, the maturity. And I think Tony Ferguson won this fight outside of the octagon. If you look at the verbal exchanges these two guys had prior to the fight, Tony Ferguson was getting the better of all of them. Even after Kevin Lee said that he was going to own him in all the press conferences and media interviews and things like that, he was dead silent in the majority of those interviews, even after Tony Ferguson accused him of juicing. So yeah, Kevin Lee wasn't saying much, and then he was saying that he was just letting Tony do the talking, and that he was going to do the talking inside the octagon with his fist, that he was going to show up and perform and just let Ferguson run his mouth. But I think he wasn't saying anything because he hadn't really stepped in there with someone that was pretty good trash talker, even though he is cringy at times. But Tony Ferguson knows what he's talking about. So once they stepped in there, or in the weigh-in, I think that's when I saw Kevin Lee kind of breaking, when he started cursing up a storm and yelling at Tony Ferguson while Tony Ferguson had his headphones in. He was completely ignoring them. I'm pretty sure he couldn't hear a word that Kevin Lee was saying, but Lee was still out there shouting, screaming, acting like he wanted to go fight him. And then, like I said, it goes back to the end of the first round where he was throwing those late punches. That's when I knew that Kevin Lee was broken down. Both guys did hit the mat off of punches in the first round. I don't think they were hurt. I think they were just both off balance. So Tony Ferguson got hit, fell down, and then Ferguson hit Lee after that, and Lee hit the mat. I don't think they were in danger. I don't think they were wobbled. But in the second round is where you saw Tony Ferguson start to find his zone. He started to land the jab. He started moving around. Kevin Lee shot for a couple takedowns. Ferguson stuffed him more. He was able to get back up. But Ferguson just felt, you can see that he was way more comfortable. He was landing the shots. He was talking smack to Kevin Lee, and then you saw Kevin Lee start gassing. And I kind of knew that his gas tank, his conditioning wasn't going to be as good because of the tough weight cut. It was a brutal weight cut. I mean, at first, Kevin Lee didn't make weight. He was a pound over. He was at 156. He had an hour, I believe, to make weight. He came back, and there was rumors, I believe. I'm not sure if it was Ariel Helwani who reported it, but he said that Kevin Lee was holding on to his trainer's shoulder while he was walking in the hallway prior to the second time that he went to weigh in. So you can kind of see it in his face that he was drained, and it was going to take a lot out of him, and it did. He gassed out. Tony Ferguson took advantage. You cannot gas out against Tony Ferguson because he's constantly in your face. He's constantly throwing jabs. He's constantly throwing kicks. He's just constantly pressuring you. And if you're young, if you're inexperienced, if you're not prepared for that kind of pressure, you're going to fold. And Kevin Lee folded. So Kevin Lee was able to slam Tony Ferguson in the third round. Ferguson sunk in, or he tried to sink in an arm bar. It was very close to being locked in. He was able to escape. Kevin Lee escaped and then fell into Tony Ferguson's guard. Ferguson started landing some hard elbows to the top of Kevin Lee's head, and I think they were hurting him before sinking in the triangle choke. So it definitely displayed that Tony Ferguson has much more tools and weapons in his arsenal, in terms of coming off his back. He doesn't just have a darts choke. I mean, it just goes to show how complete Tony Ferguson is. His boxing, his striking, his kicks, his wrestling, his scrambling abilities, his jiu-jitsu is off the charts. So there's really nothing that this guy can't do. There's really no holes in his game. And after this performance, after this fight, there's only one fight to make, and that's Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor has the official lightweight champion, but he's not the champion until you defend it. He's not defending it. I mean, he did KO a GOAT in Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. Okay, didn't defend that belt. He went on to fight Nate Diaz twice with no belts on the line. Lost one of them. Got choked out against Nate Diaz in the first fight. Then he goes on to fight Eddie Alvarez to challenge for the 155-pound belt. He ends up getting the job done. Becomes the first fighter ever to hold two belts in two separate weight classes. And after that, he goes on to fight Floyd Money Mayweather in a boxing match. Now, I give him props for going out there, making his money, making his cash. But at the end of the day, there's a stacked division waiting for you in the lightweight division in the UFC. You decided to vacate your 145-pound belt. Okay, well, come back and defend it because you're holding up that division. There's so much talent in that division. You got Edson Barbosa, who's on a tear right now. Ferguson, who's the current interim lightweight champion, as we were previously discussing. The new talent in Justin Gaethje. So this 155-pound division is a shark tank, man. There's contender after contender. Tony Ferguson, as far as I'm concerned, is the real champion because he's beating a majority of them. He's beating a majority of the top 10 guys. He's constantly fought legitimate fighters in that division, while Conor McGregor is out there fighting people who are getting TKO'd by somebody that don't even have power. So I mean, Conor McGregor has to come back. He has to fight Tony Ferguson, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure if it will happen because Dana White pretty much lets Conor McGregor do whatever the heck he wants. He lets him go around, and dictate what he wants to do. But I mean, this is a fight that you have to make. I mean, if you have someone that is the interim lightweight champion and you're the current champion, wouldn't it make you upset that someone else has a phony belt in your eyes? So you want to come back and prove to the public that you're the real champion, that you're still the real champion. So he has to come back. If he's as game as he says he is, he needs to come back to the UFC and he needs to fight Tony Ferguson as soon as they can schedule a fight, because that's a fight that needs to happen. Will it happen? I'm not sure. I don't think Conor McGregor wants any part of Tony Ferguson. I don't think Khabib wants any part of Tony Ferguson. So it takes a game opponent for you to come in there and fight a guy like Tony, who's just gonna march you down. You can hurt him, but it's very hard to put him away. No one has yet to put him away in the UFC. So I don't know if Conor McGregor is up for this kind of challenge. I'm not sure if he's gonna end up fighting Nate Diaz. If you do, okay, it's gonna generate a lot of money, probably more money than against Tony Ferguson. But Tony Ferguson is much more of a risk than Nate Diaz is. And Conor McGregor knows that. And at this point, Conor McGregor is looking for the big fights, the ways that he can make the largest amounts of money, to support his family and things like that, to be set for the future without taking risks. Now, Nate Diaz is going to make a lot of money, but Tony Ferguson is the risk, and probably would end up being a loss on Conor McGregor's resume if he does step in there with Tony Ferguson. I think Tony Ferguson is too complete. I mean, Conor McGregor's jiu-jitsu is suspect. His grappling is suspect. He has excellent power, but he gasses, and like I said earlier, you cannot gas against El Cucuy because he will haunt you. He will come down, break you mentally and physically. I mean, El Cucuy is just a scary dude inside the octagon, and I was thinking that to myself as I was watching the fight. I mean, he's just scary, man. I mean, it must be very scary for you to step in there with a guy that you know is the biggest threat in that division. So I don't know if Conor McGregor is up for it. I hope he does, because I really want to see that fight happen. Tony Ferguson, this title shot, even though it was for an inch belt, was long overdue for Tony Ferguson. I mean, he's just been wrecking in that division. He's the hottest fighter right now in the lightweight division. So this is the fight to make. I think Tony Ferguson does beat him, and I think he does it pretty easily. But I mean, we've yet to see that. But as far as I'm concerned, Conor McGregor needs to man the heck up. He needs to come back and he needs to fight Tony Ferguson, because that's the fight that needs to be made. That's the fight that all true fans really want to see, and not just the McGregor nut huggers out there. So it'd be interesting to see how this all plays out. But if not, then Tony Ferguson should defend the belt, maybe against an Edson Barbosa, maybe the winner of Eddie Alvarez and Justin Gaethje. But if I'm Tony Ferguson, I would more so lean to waiting until Conor McGregor is done fighting Nate Diaz, if that does happen. But like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Well, anyways, if you like these reaction videos, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see these after every UFC card, you know, make sure to leave a comment down below about what you thought about the fight. What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think McGregor's going to fight Tony Ferguson, or do you think Ferguson is going to have to fight, you know, another contender? You know, so let me know what you thought about the fights last night, your picks for last night as well. Let me know how you guys did. I want to start a conversation with you guys in the comments down below. But like I said, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share the video, and stay tuned for more content.